got to start with Alexander Isak, though, who's informed Newcastle he wants to explore his options in this transfer window. The Premier League champions Liverpool made an informal approach for Isak last week and remain huge admirers of the Sweden striker.
Alexander Isak, Mike, was right now supposed to be in the air en route to Singapore for the next stage of Newcastle's pre-season preparations. You may remember at the weekend he travelled back to Glasgow from Austria for the friendly match against Celtic, but was then missing for the game. Eddie Howe said afterwards that he had a slight issue that they were assessing. They were managing his minutes, but also he wanted to essentially take him out of the firing line due to the speculation that was surrounding him, and he was sent back to Newcastle to recover from that injury. And I think, you know, reading between the lines to try and get his head into a good space. And then this morning, 5 days later, Isak, as I say, was supposed to be on that flight to Singapore. The official line from the football club was that he was nursing that slight or minor thigh injury and he would recover back here at Tyneside. And then the news broke just about an hour or so later that, as you rightly say, Isak wants to explore his options this transfer window. Of course, that on the back of an unofficial approach from Liverpool last week to Newcastle. Not what any Newcastle United supporter wanted. They wanted to be signing players this window. They thought it was the window they would finally strengthen. They've really struggled to do that, only bringing in Anthony Elanga so far, and now the fear from them that Alexander Isak could be about to go after he told the club he wants to explore his options over a potential departure.
Well, if Isak does leave, Newcastle are interested in signing the RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko. Now, they've explored the conditions of a deal for the 22-year-old, and it's our understanding that Sesko's camp turned down a proposal from a Saudi Pro League club this week. Mark McAdams here to talk us through this Isak story from the Liverpool point of view. Right, when they got Ekitike, I thought, they're done. Great signing, well done. Are they going to get Isak as well? Are they serious?
They're serious about strengthening the squad over the course of this summer. They made that initial approach, an informal one, to Newcastle to explore any potential sale of Alexander Isak, and were told he's not for sale. So they moved on to other targets, which of course was Hugo Ekitike. We know that deal is done and dusted and he's now a Liverpool player. However, they are still in the market to strengthen the squad. Now, first things first, Mike, if Liverpool were to make a number of sales in advanced positions, those strikers, those wide men, then potentially they're going to have to restock them. They're going to have to find players that they believe are at the right quality for Liverpool Football Club. For example, they lose Darwin Núñez or Luis Díaz, who's been linked with Bayern Munich, or Harvey Elliott. They're going to need to replace those players. So therefore, does that interest in Alexander Isak disappear? Or do they say, well, OK, let us know the conditions of a potential deal? Since they had that initial contact last week, things have changed quite considerably, as Keith Downey has just outlined. He's told him he wants to explore potential moves this summer. He's explained that to the football club, so therefore it's a different dynamic to what it was last week. You might find that Liverpool's interest, while they've stepped back from it for the moment, they might reignite it in the next few days.
You and I know transfers change really quickly, lickety-split. Liverpool have been adamant. Luis Díaz going nowhere. That changes, doesn't it, if Isak is suddenly a target?
Absolutely, and I think Bayern Munich's opening offer, which we understand to be around 67 million euros that was rejected for Luis Díaz, is the first point of action between the two football clubs. We understand from our colleague Sky in Germany that Luis Díaz is still very much a target for Bayern Munich, so you'd imagine that a second offer will be forthcoming at some stage. And if Liverpool do start to lose players over the course of the next few weeks, then they are going to have to strengthen, and therefore the Alexander Isak thing could be something on the agenda in the next few weeks once again.
That's definitely strengthening. How do they afford him, though, given how much they've already spent this summer?
They've spent 295 million so far, and that includes potential add-ons. When you look at the fixed fees, it's around 250 million. When you look at their net spend so far in this summer's window, it's around 200 million. So they've actually been quite clever and creative. They've generated around 60 million worth of income so far. And if you were to sell Luis Díaz, Harvey Elliott and Darwin Núñez, you'd be looking at, between 150 and 200 million, hence why they can go again. The other side of the coin is that Liverpool Football Club are really well run by FSG. They didn't spend virtually no money last summer, whilst turning over in excess of 600 million in their last set of financial accounts that ended in May 2024. Their next set of financial accounts will show a huge uplift in both commercial income, in revenue driven by winning the Premier League, their commercial partnerships that have all got bonuses attached because of their success. So therefore, that allows them more room to spend money. An independent football financial expert has said to me, not only could they spend what they've already spent comfortably, they could spend another 200 million on top of the 295 that they've committed to in this summer and still be PSR compliant.
Wow, they're in fabulous shape. As are you, Mark McCann. Thank you very much.
It's the pink, the mauve.
Very nice. Well, Liverpool are currently on their pre-season tour in Hong Kong, and their skipper Virgil van Dijk has revealed they're continuing to work hard to improve that squad.
Listen, I think this season we all start from scratch. I think everyone's tried to improve their teams, and we as well. I think we did a great addition to the team so far. And let's see what happens for the rest of the transfer window. But I think it's all down to hard work, showing our quality, consistency, and we know how difficult that is. So focus on ourselves, and the hard work obviously is already going. You know, we work so hard in training.
Well, the Newcastle fans that we caught up with would be really sad to see Isak go, but they've implored the club to act quickly and find a replacement.
It's obviously devastating to lose Isak if we do lose him, best striker in the world, in my opinion, but no player is bigger than the club. You know, for me, we have to move quickly. This should have been sorted already. We need to get his replacement in, and the money will bring in 4 or 5 quality replacements, hopefully.
If he wants to go, he can, go. He's done everything he could for the club, hasn't he? So I think he'd go with everyone's well wishes. I think if he is going to go, the time's now, so we can act and get some players in ASAP. I think going into a Champions League season without him and no replacements would be, devastating.
It's quite hard because I feel like we should be spending more money and a bit faster because we keep losing all our targets, and to lose Isak as well would be really not great.
He wants to leave, so let him leave. I don't want a sulking striker here for the next 12 months, run his contract down, maybe get an injury, maybe get less money for him. Just replace him now for me. If he wants to go, let him go.
So we've already told you that Newcastle interested in Benjamin Sesko if Isak goes, and they also held more talks with Brentford over signing Yoane Wissa. Now, it's our understanding Brentford value the player at least £40 million, but he wants to go. Newcastle have been increasingly hopeful they can get him for about £35 million. Brentford's valuation of Wissa has increased after Brian Mbeumo's sale because it's seen as a risk to lose both players. Got to start with Alexander Isak, though, who's informed Newcastle he wants to explore his options in this transfer window. The Premier League champions Liverpool made an informal approach for Isak last week and remain huge admirers of the Sweden striker.
Alexander Isak, Mike, was right now supposed to be in the air en route to Singapore for the next stage of Newcastle's pre-season preparations. You may remember at the weekend he travelled back to Glasgow from Austria for the friendly match against Celtic, but was then missing for the game. Eddie Howe said afterwards that he had a slight issue that they were assessing. They were managing his minutes, but also he wanted to essentially take him out of the firing line due to the speculation that was surrounding him, and he was sent back to Newcastle to recover from that injury. And I think, reading between the lines to try and get his head into a good space. And then this morning, 5 days later, Isak, as I say, was supposed to be on that flight to Singapore. The official line from the football club was that he was nursing that slight or minor thigh injury, and he would recover back here at Tyneside. And then the news broke just about an hour or so later that, as you rightly say, Isak wants to explore his options this transfer window. Of course, that on the back of an unofficial approach from Liverpool last week to Newcastle. Not what any Newcastle United supporter wanted. They wanted to be signing players this window. They thought it was the window they would finally strengthen. They've really struggled to do that, only bringing in Anthony Elanga so far, and now the fear from them that Alexander Isak could be about to go after he told the club he wants to explore his options over a potential departure.
Well, if Isak does leave, Newcastle are interested in signing the RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko. Now, they've explored the conditions of a deal for the 22-year-old, and it's our understanding that Sesko's camp turned down a proposal from a Saudi Pro League club.
At the end of the Alexander Isak story, you were true to your word. What have you got for us?
Yeah, we've been saying for some time really now, since the weekend when Alexander Isak was left out of the squad to play Celtic, that Isak has been affected by the speculation surrounding him. In fact, Eddie Howe insinuated that afterwards and said that was the reason why he was sent home back here to Newcastle and wasn't sat on the bench or involved at all against Celtic. What I can tell you now is that Isak has informed the club that he wants to explore his options in this transfer window, of course, with interest in him. As we told you last week from Liverpool, they made that informal approach to Newcastle United when Newcastle were deep in conversations with Eintracht Frankfurt over a move for Hugo Ekitike. What ended up happening is Newcastle said Isak wasn't for sale. Instead, Liverpool turned their attentions to Ekitike and managed to get that deal over the line in the last couple of days. But Isak has been left behind here on Tyneside while his teammates and his manager fly to Singapore. They took off around about 2 hours ago for the latest part of their pre-season preparations. Singapore first, then on to South Korea. They play 3 matches in 12 days. The official line from the club is that he's back here and he's recovering from a minor thigh injury, and the feeling was that he shouldn't be on a long-haul flight. But what we can tell you is that he has asked the club that he would like to explore his options this transfer window with, of course, that interest from Liverpool. So, look, again, I'll say it, Rob, it's not the last we'll hear of this. I would imagine I'll be talking about this for the next couple of weeks as we move towards the end of the transfer window. Newcastle insist Isak isn't for sale. He has 3 years left on his contract, so they're in a strong position in terms of the player's value. They value him at what would be a Premier League record of £150 million.
You've touched on it a little bit there, Keith. The club's stance is that if they were ever to let him go, it would cost a huge amount to prize him away from Newcastle. It's been a difficult couple of windows, you would say, for the club, in the fact they've not been able to bring in as many as they'd like. They would be desperate to avoid losing their top scorer from last season now.
Yeah, look, Newcastle wanted to use this window to build. They wanted to bring in 4 players, a goalkeeper, they wanted to bring in a central defender, a right winger, and another forward. So they've managed to bring in Anthony Elanga for 52 plus £3 million. They wanted to bring in a second striker to come in and compete with Alexander Isak. I told you a moment ago, of course, about their talks with Eintracht Frankfurt over Hugo Ekitike. Liverpool hijacked that deal, and they still retain an interest in Isak as well. It's not what the Newcastle United supporters want to hear ahead of a Champions League season, where of course they're going to be battling on the front of the Champions League and the Premier League as well. They want to hold on to their best players. This is the last thing that they wanted to hear, that Alexander Isak's head essentially has been turned going into the new season. I spoke to Eddie Howe after the match against Celtic on Saturday, where he said, look, part of the reason he wasn't there was because he was nursing an injury. They were managing his minutes, but also part of that was just to try and clear his head and take him away from being sat in the stand and watching on with all that speculation circling over him. This is what Eddie Howe had to say at the weekend.
Alex was with us all the way through Austria, but today, with all the speculation and things that are going on, I decided to send him home. The last thing Alex wants if he's not playing is to be sat in the stand, being under that scrutiny. I don't think that's fair to the player. So if he wasn't going to play today, which we mutually agreed that he needs a little bit more training time, then it's best he's not here. And all I can say is that Alex is happy at Newcastle. He loves the players that he plays with, the staff, the team. I've never had any issue with him, other than really enjoying seeing his talent and seeing him express himself. And certainly, I'm confident that he's going to be here at the start of the season. I have conversations with, I'd say, 100% of the players on their futures. I'm very, very give with them. So whether that's at the end of the season, whether that's during pre-season, so yes, I've had discussions with him, but that's not abnormal. You know, I respect a player's career and how short it is. All the time I will be communicating my desires and my wishes to them and what I see and trying to help them. Alex has been really good and he's trained really well so far this season. So I know there'll be lots of noise around it and I can't really control that, but from inside he's been really good. I've never had any issue with him other than really enjoying seeing his talent and seeing him express himself, and certainly I'm confident that he's going to be here at the start of the season.
And it now becomes fascinating, Keith, as to how this progresses, because we heard Eddie Howe say just there he's been really good, he's trained really well. That might change if Alexander Isak decides to dig his heels in a little bit.
Yeah, well, clearly, Rob, he's unsettled, and I think Eddie Howe is going to have to. I mean, look, we know he's a great man manager. He is going to have to do the best man management job of all time, really, to try and get Isak into a positive frame of mind going into the season. Because reading between the lines, the fact he's asked to explore his options, his head has been turned. Obviously, he's been left back here in Newcastle, 1, due to the injury, and 2, due to the fact that he has been affected by the interest, the speculation, everything that's going on. Alexander Isak feels that, well, look, he is. He's one of the best players in the Premier League. He's arguably the best striker in the Premier League. He feels that he should be paid similar to what these top strikers are, and he's not at Newcastle United, but he's, I would imagine, of the belief that if he was to move to another club, whether that's Liverpool or elsewhere, he would be remunerated in that way. So I think the club are going to have to come to some kind of conclusion here where, does he get a pay rise? Do they allow him to speak to other clubs, or do they allow time and space, and perhaps the situation will maybe calm down over the next few weeks once Isak's had some time to reflect on the situation? But you asked me what happens now. Well, what happens now? Either someone comes in and stumps up the money that Newcastle are looking for, as I said to you a moment ago, £150 million, or Isak signs a new contract on bigger money, or he just gets his head back on the fact that he's a Newcastle United player, because he is, and attempts to begin the season in a positive frame of mind. But look, it's a really delicate situation, this one, isn't it? The last thing Eddie Howe wanted, the last thing the Newcastle fans wanted, just listening to Eddie Howe at the weekend, I was in that press conference after the Celtic match and he sounded exhausted, to be honest. Remember, there's no sporting director at the football club at the moment. They're looking for a new chief executive. Eddie Howe and his nephew Andy Howe, who's high up in the recruitment, have been involved at the front, really, of the whole transfer plan this summer. And Newcastle have been bruised because they've tried for Liam Delap, been unable to get him. They've tried for João Pedro, been unable to get him. They've tried for Dean Howson, been unable to get him. That's just 3. There's been a number of players that they've got quite far down the line with, thought they've had a chance of getting them, only to be left disappointed. And then their crown jewel, Alexander Isak, is now saying he wants to explore his options this summer. So it could not have gone any worse for them. Far from ideal that Isak has been left home here at Newcastle, but maybe this will just give him and the club the time and space away from each other to come to some kind of mutual understanding that if a club doesn't come in and offer the money that Newcastle United are looking for, Isak has to get his head down and concentrate on starting the season. A very, very important season with Newcastle United. But look, it's a developing story, this one, Rob. As I said to you a moment ago, it's got legs. I would imagine we'll be speaking about this one for the remainder of the transfer window. It will be intriguing to see if Alexander Isak is a Newcastle United player or not come the end of August. Liverpool retain an interest in him. We'll have to wait and see whether they've got the money to stump up an offer to afford Alexander Isak. I would suggest at the moment it would be difficult for them, but let's see what they do in terms of player sales. So look, not a good time for Newcastle United supporters. They are desperately trying to bring in players themselves. They're in advanced negotiations with Brentford over a deal for Yoane Wissa. He was supposed to be the backup striker to Alexander Isak, not the only striker. So let's see how this one develops over the next days and weeks.
Just remind us, Keith, who Newcastle's first home game of the season is?
Do you know, I've got so much in my mind, I can't even think, but I've had a moment to think there, and you're right. It's Liverpool at home. I think it's Monday Night Football, isn't it? I was actually thinking of their first match, which of course is away to Aston Villa, but yeah, I mean, that's going to be some evening, that, isn't it? Whichever side Alexander Isak is playing for.
I knew you'd get it there eventually. Keith, thank you very much for the moment.
Arsenal have signed Cristhian Mosquera from Valencia in a deal worth at least £13 million. Mosquera has joined his new teammates in Singapore after agreeing a 5-year contract. So Arsenal got Mosquera in the door, and they're also closing in on a striker at last. Viktor Gyökeres is expected in London tomorrow to sort the final contractual details with the club. A deal worth up to £63.8 million has been agreed. Now that's split into a guaranteed fee of £55.1 million plus an additional £8.7 million in add-ons. The plan is for him to join Mikel Arteta's squad in Singapore and complete his transfer from Sporting.
Welcome back to Sport Lab. We've got a big transfer story developing. Newcastle striker Alexander Isak has told the club he wants to explore other options this summer. Let's get into the full story. Alexander Isak has informed Newcastle United that he's open to a move away during this transfer window. While he hasn't submitted a formal transfer request, talks over a new contract have stalled, and the Swedish international is now attracting serious attention. Isak was sent home ahead of Newcastle's 4-0 pre-season defeat to Celtic, and will miss the club's tour of Asia, officially due to a minor thigh injury. However, sources say transfer speculation was also a factor in his absence. Liverpool made an informal approach for the 24-year-old last week before moving to sign Hugo Ekitike for £79 million, but they remain big admirers of Isak. Newcastle say Isak is not for sale and value him at a massive £150 million, with 3 years left on his contract. That gives them a strong position, but the player's desire to consider other opportunities could make things interesting. What do you think? Is Isak worth £150 million, and should Newcastle cash in or hold firm? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Sport Lab for all the latest transfer updates.